Hey, John. How you doing?
Hey, Glenn. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Glenn Loury here, The Glenn Show. I'm with John McWhorter, my regular conversation partner. He teaches at Columbia University, writes for the most important newspaper in the world. I think I heard him say recently, the New York Times, and is my buddy. I'm a emeritus professor at Brown University. I am newly appointed as distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University. And I'm host of The Glenn Show. Yeah, you didn't know about that, did you?
I didn't know that official part, no.
Effective July 1st, I'm a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, and I'm very proud to be able to say that.
Is that a paid position?
There is a stipend that goes with the appointment, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't telling you how much, though.
Congratulations. That's great.
Yeah. Working on, with Stephen Davis, who's the research director there, on organizing a conference celebrating the career of Thomas Sowell, the economist, the African-American intellectual and public figure, as well as a scholar with dozens of books and a great career behind him. He's still going strong. Frankly, I don't know if you noticed, but my YouTube feed throws him up regularly as an acerbic commentator on one thing or another going on. He has an opinion about Zohran Mamdani.
Mm-hmm.
And at 95 years old, he has an opinion about Zohran from Palo Alto, California. He has an opinion about Zohran. So what's your opinion about Zohran?
He's too young and inexperienced for the job. I mean, that's clear. But I find his victory an example of the persistence of high woke. Like in my last Times column, I wrote that it's often said that wokeness peaked, the wokeness of 20 and 21. And I think it didn't peak. It just expresses itself in different ways. It's kind of embers that are always burning. And I made the point that the pitch of a lot of the protest about what's going on in Gaza, the particular pitch of it, is more of that 2021 energy. And I said that there are three main elements to high woke versus just being aware of structural racism. And one of them is that you place battling the power of whiteness at the center of everything instead of being one of many. The second is the punitive aspect, that people deserve to suffer. And the third is the deafness to facts, the idea that the agenda is more important than actually making sense if you have to choose between one or the other. And there's some of that, not in Mamdani. I don't know him. I haven't studied him closely, but in his victory, there is some of that. In that, very quickly, first, placing battling the power of whiteness at the center. So here's this person with no real experience, ideas that don't really make any sense, and yet he wins. And the fact is that if he were white, he wouldn't have. A lot of the appeal for many is that he's brown, whatever Brown thinks. There's that elevation, that putting it at the center. So this 33-year-old person with no real ideas, but that person becomes mayor because everybody likes seeing this smiling brown face. The punitive aspect of it, in that he refuses to disavow the phrase globalize the intifada. And the thing is, intifada, okay, maybe technically it means, to struggle or to uprise, but what it means effectively in the real world is violence. And for him to wink and let that pass, now he's not explicitly saying that he was celebrating what Hamas did, but in refusing to disavow it and pretending that intifada doesn't mean what it means, it's punitive. And I'm not calling him a zealot, but that's the idea that, the Jews deserve this because, of that agenda. And then finally, there is the resistance to facts, as in you elect him when he has ideas that even liberals understand don't make sense and are not workable. It's dorm room socialism. And it's because he's 7 years old. And yet you elect him mayor, which is essentially what has happened, despite the facts, because the facts don't matter. His brown skin matters. But there's a little of that there. That's what I think of Mamdani. I thought it's 2020 again, except expressing itself in a different way. It's like you whack-a-mole. We're never going to fully get rid of it.
Wow. So Brown, I just want to play the devil's advocate with you here for a minute, John. Really? It's because he's brown? How you know that? He's a Muslim. How's that not a part of the story? He's a socialist. Why is that not more important than him being brown? A critic, not me, your friend, might say, this is telling me more about your obsessions, John McWhorter, with race than it's telling me about Zohran Mamdani, because brown is the least of it. He's, his father was born in Uganda. Is that correct? His mother in India, mother a filmmaker, father a very distinguished academic. I took a look at his CV, man. He's got a lot of books out there. I haven't read any of them, but they're well published. And he's brown? Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it's about the vibe.
You didn't mention that he was a socialist, man. Or is that part of the third point that the ideas don't
you don't listen to that because he's got brown skin and therefore he's not white. And just let's try this. And you know what I just said? I don't know if it would make it past a fact-checking department, the argument, but I feel it deeply. Imagine him as Ronan Farrow, the reporter. Ronan Farrow, who looks uncannily like Frank Sinatra, despite Mia Farrow denying that there's any connection. So imagine him about 10 years ago when he was about Mamdani's age. He's got the same charm, the same pretty smile. He dresses, in nice suits. And he's walking around with these socialist proposals that, come out of things somebody who's smart and 20 in college enjoys. And he's walking around, he's quote unquote running a good campaign. Ronan Farrow would not have become the mayor of New York because a certain amount of the mystique would be missing. The kinds of people who love Zohran Mamdani, even though they're not thinking of it consciously, would be thinking, but he's white. There wouldn't be the idea that you're voting for the other. He's a white boy. Mamdani's skin color had a lot to do with this. And it's because of this elevation. He constitutes a contestation of whiteness in his very history and in just what he looks like, I think.
Do you think that that's true of, the Indian guy who ran for president on the Republican side, Vivek Ramaswamy?
Mm-hmm.
You think that some of his appeal was because he was not white? I'm not.
No, he's a vigorous arguer. I mean, he's scrappy. He makes his points with, his, elbows sharp. With him, I don't think that the people who support him find it cool that he's Indian. And I think, frankly, when it comes to South Asian, I think among those people, they don't care either way. With him, it's about what he's like. And frankly, the fact that he's willing to be rather obnoxious in public, which constitutes a kind of a political theater. That's not Mamdani's game. To be honest, to an extent, all he had to do was just stand there. And also, the vibes matters in elections. Warren G. Harding, a lot of why he got elected was because women newly had the vote and he was considered handsome. These things matter. Obama was considered very sexy by a lot of people. These things matter. Mamdani, because of anatomical accident, happens to have a very charming smile. That helps, But this stuff is not deep. And it's not about what he actually proposed. It's about him as just a moment. Maybe you would have said the same thing about Obama back then. And in fact, you were. But it's more of that sort of thing.
All right, John McWhorter. And you don't like mobilize the Intifada, huh? You think he's calling for violence? Isn't that slanderous, man? I mean, hasn't he explained himself? Even and I don't live in New York City and haven't followed this, know what he's going to say, which is, I want there to be one person, one vote between the river and the sea. I want there to be democracy. I want everybody to have equal rights who are under the control of the Israeli state. That's what he's going to say. How's that advocating violence, John? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a smear, isn't it, John?
No, because what he's saying is intifada can mean many things. And I'm choosing to use it to mean this. And that's cute. But suppose a white man said white power. And people say, well, that makes me think about the Klan and lynching. And this very articulate young man says, no, I just mean that we need to stop demonizing white people and we need to celebrate the sorts of things that we created, like the Declaration of Independence and psychoanalysis and AI. So that's what I mean by white power. I don't mean what you're thinking. That would be considered inhuman. And of course, the counter argument there would be, it's okay to use intifada creatively because we're punching up. The white man can't do it because he's punching down. No, the question there is, how does it benefit your side, whether you're down or up, to use a term that connotes vicious violence? Punching up, it's better for you? Is that good for your brand? No.
John, you say this without any sense of shame or self-consciousness. Vicious violence. Do you know what's going on in Gaza?
I think I do.
You accuse Mamdani of vicious violence when he opposes what's going on in Gaza? Man, that takes a real stretch of the imagination. Vicious violence?
You mean it's supposed to be about tit for tat?
No. I mean, a guy says, and this is Mamdani, and I don't have a horse in this race. I'm not for him or against him. I understand he says he would arrest Benjamin Netanyahu under World Court indictment if he were to set foot in New York City, and and he still won an election in New York City. I mean, that tells me that some people have some sympathy for the Palestinians who are under the boot of what could, I think, very plausibly be called vicious violence. And here you are, because of a choice of a word, and obviously it wasn't a random choice, it was a strategic choice. It was meant to provoke, in a way, the reaction that you've offered, accusing him of endorsing violence. I mean,
let's try this.
Yeah.
Because remember, what we're thinking about is October 7th and the hideous things that were done to those people. And, however you feel about the history, et cetera, I think any responsible humanist person, and especially if we're here in New York, where there are so many Jewish people of so many different kinds, is responsible for avoiding seeming to condone what Hamas did as somehow understandable, and then especially in light of what's happened since. Because this is a quick anecdote.
The world is in turmoil. There are power struggles at home and abroad, multiple wars to pay attention to. Old alliances are being tested and new ones are being forged. The information we get on all of this comes pre-packaged as part of competing narratives. We need a way to cut through the noise, spot bias, and see the full picture. The tool I use for this is Ground News. It's the website and app I rely on daily to stay informed, to cut through the noise, and to get closer to the truth. Visit ground.news/Glenn Show to see for yourself how it works. My favorite feature of Ground News is the blind spot feed. It shows you stories that are disproportionately reported by either the left or the right, about 20 such stories every day. So, for example, here's a story that the left is covering, but the right isn't. 875 Palestinians killed near aid sites, says UN Human Rights Office. Conversely, here's another on the same subject, but this one is covered by the right and ignored by the left. All Palestinians in Gaza are eligible for asylum in France, court rules. You can see how somebody who only reads the left-leaning outlets and somebody who only reads the right-leaning outlets would have different thoughts on this. For both of these, and for every story, Ground News gives you a breakdown of the sources covering it, the bias of the media outlets reporting across the left, center, and right, how reliable these sources have been in the past, and who owns them. This is the kind of news analysis you won't find anywhere else. Right now, my viewers can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage plan, which is the same plan I use. Make sure you subscribe using my link at ground.news/Glenn Show. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code when signing up. That's ground.news/Glenn Show.
All that, I'm sorry, from Globalize the Intifada, all of that, he's pro-Hamas now?
No, I wouldn't say pro-Hamas, but the idea is what they did was unfortunate, but we have to understand it given what they had been dealing with, and then certainly look at what's gone on since then, all of the violence that they've suffered. And I don't like that view. I think that somebody in a position of responsibility cannot wink at something as gruesome as October 7th. It was too horrible a thing. I remember after 9/11, this is where I get this kind of feeling. After 9/11, I happened to have two TAs for one of my classes, and they were both Muslims. One of them was a Black Muslim, Black American Muslim. One of them was an Afghani. They were very smart. They were very nice people. And inevitably, we got into a conversation about what Osama bin Laden had done. And both of them kept on saying it was terrible, but kind of looking over my shoulder. And then both of them made a very intelligent case. I had never heard this done, but they made an intelligent case that for them, Osama bin Laden had done something that was terrible, but was a statement that they admired. They saw it as him representing a kind of legitimate Muslim resentment. And he had done something that, in the grand scheme of things, they could not say they found completely awful. They didn't put it quite that way, but that is what they meant. I'm not reading into their words. And I had a feeling, and this is just a feeling. My sense was that if I hadn't been there, they would have been doing high fives, that they would have been a little more open about it, that all those people died. But you know what? White America and its support for Israel means that, in a way, those people had it coming. And I understand the argument. Susan Sontag said the same things. I get it, but I don't like it. I don't like it. Nobody has that coming.
How do you like what's proceeded from October 7th in Gaza? How do you like the tens of thousands of dead? How do you like the babies buried under collapsed buildings, hospitals destroyed, people followed home from work and their families killed, so forth and so on? How do you like that?
All that was horrific. And go ahead.
No,
I felt that to go in and try to get Osama bin Laden made a certain sense. It all got far beyond that. There was the war in Iraq, and how long we ended up in Afghanistan, and all these people going over there and killing people and getting killed. That's not the way it was supposed to go. But I think that it's also not supposed to go that somebody looks upon those two buildings, where 3,000 people were barbecued, and think, well, in a way, good, because so many of those people, there were kids at home who never saw their parents again. No, I'm sorry, that's not just terrible.
Do you equate the U.S. entailment in the war against Islamic terrorism, of which the the September 11th tragedy and atrocity was one, with the Israeli-Palestinian entailment? You said, never mind the history, October 7th was a horrific thing. And I concede, of course, October 7th was a horrific thing, and it warranted and necessitated a vigorous response, though I would say that the response that we've seen over the last year and a half has gone beyond anything that was justified by that event, and it has its own logic within the Israeli political framework, of which October 7th is a convenient justification for things that, as we see playing out on the West Bank, are intrinsic to the domination. This is going back to our previous discussion. Whatever. But you equate that, the U.S. vis-a-vis global Islamic terrorism is, in your mind, the same thing, or analogous to the Israeli position vis-a-vis the Palestinians?
No, I do not think, if I understand your question, and I'm under-caffeinated today, but no, I do not think that what happened over the 20 years from 9/11, essentially, was justifiable because of what happened to those two buildings and all of those people. There was a mission creep, way too much destruction, way too much murder. And there is a similar argument, and yes, I'm standing away from it. There is a similar argument about Gaza, although, I don't know, I'm genuinely not sure that taking out a few Hamas leaders and scaring some people and leaving it there would have been in Israel's best interest. I'm genuinely not sure whether there's any solution other than trying to eliminate Hamas completely, if that can be done.
No matter how many are killed along the way, so-called innocent civilians, or are there no innocent civilians in Gaza amongst the many tens of thousands?
Well, it just seems to come down to if they hadn't done what they did. And on this show, I said, I think a year and a half ago, you can't just mow down all of Gaza. That's what it looked like to me then. But
that's what has happened.
If they don't eliminate Hamas completely, Hamas is going to do that again. They've said that they're going to do that again, not to mention shunt resources away from Gazans themselves. They're just going to keep doing it. Is there room? And this is a question because, is there room for the idea that maybe what they're doing, not starving the Gazans, and I hope they're not firing on Gazans coming for food. That's one thing where
But they are, John, are they not?
If that is not justifiable, if that's what's going on. And
Okay.
I'm afraid I know the official media story. Do you know for sure that the IDF is firing upon Gazans who are coming to get their food?
All I know is what I read in the various newspapers that I read. And, there are reports to that effect, but I don't know
that part
firsthand way.
Is unpardonable. But if they have to knock down an awful lot of buildings in order to uproot these people who hide underground in order to not be found, or so that the media will take their side, is there any way other than that, given what Hamas's aims are? And maybe somebody has an answer to that question. Do you have one? That's what frustrates me. What should they have done?
Not my problem. I don't have to have an answer to that question to be appalled at what they've done. I don't have to have an answer to that question to not want my country to have anything to do with it. I'm appalled at what's going on in Gaza, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't want to contribute to it.
Okay.
It's not my problem. I know that sounds very, very harsh, but man, the moral calculus here, it seems to me, is very difficult. I grant you. I mean, by the way, many Jewish Americans agree with me. I could name them. Many Israelis agree with me. I could name them.
A great many. Yeah.
A great many who are haunted by the specter of this atrocity, quote unquote, that's been perpetrated in the aftermath of October 7th against the many hundreds of thousands who've been made homeless and displaced and have been slaughtered and buried under collapsed buildings and killed as collateral damage, so-called human shields, who are appalled at that and don't want that blood on their hands. And I don't want that blood on my hands. So what's that? And to say to my neighbor who is busy repelling an assault on his home with a machine gun against people with knives, what am I to do? I don't need to answer that question to be appalled at what you're doing.
I can't get past that. Hamas, as it exists, is an unstoppable force. There's no compromise possible because their entire objective, their reason for living, Hamas leadership, is this fantasy that Israel is going to gradually be wiped off of the map. And it seems that if Israel doesn't do that, and the shit of it is that they need our help to do it, that's really the shit of it, is that if they don't, it seems to me the argument is Israel should tolerate vicious terrorist attacks like that on an intermittent basis for the foreseeable future. That's the way it has to be, because to actually eliminate Hamas kills too many other people and creates too much destruction. And so Israel is responsible for, to an extent, turning the other cheek. I can't say that I find disagreement with that inconceivable. I can't say that I find it invalid to say, no, we're not going to have that happen again. Do you know what I mean? I'm imagining being Israel.
What I'm unclear about is whether or not the current course of events is, in fact, making it impossible for that to happen again. What I'm unclear about is whether Hamas is actually not being regenerated in generations yet to come by the survivors of the slaughter that's being prosecuted as we speak. I'm not sure that that's a solution, actually. I mean, I've said here before, what are you going to do? Kill them all? And it looks to me like the answer to that, given your logic, is yeah. In effect, yeah. Drive them into the Sinai, drive them into Egypt, drive them into the sea.
But it's different now because of how social history is unpredictable. With Syria toppled, as it was, with Hezbollah essentially no more, and with Iran severely severely hindered in the sorts of things. And I don't mean the nuclear weapons. I mean also the sponsoring of terrorism, the whole military network. With all of that gone, Hamas doesn't have the leg to stand on that it used to mess up the expression. And so it might be more plausible that if Hamas is reduced to embers, that there's less there are less ways for it to be fed. And that this is different from if there were still yesterday's Syria, yesterday's Iran, and Hezbollah was still, kind of glowering across the Golan Heights. Maybe that's idealistic. But whenever an Israeli says, or a Jewish person says, what else were they supposed to do? I can't say I have an answer. And I think part of it is maybe that I'm not a diplomat or that I lack imagination, but I can imagine feeling that way.
Your colleague Jeffrey Sachs has an answer. He says two-state solution. He says political rights for the Palestinians and ending this stateless netherworld that they're living in of a domination and occupation, quarantine, and periodic slaughter. They have to have political rights.
If Jeffrey Sachs...
I mean, I understand it's pie in the sky. I don't see two-state solution on the horizon. Peter Beinart says one-state solution, one person, one vote. Quote, between the river and the sea, close quote.
Beinart and Sachs can tell me, I don't mean literally, but can tell people that Hamas, as opposed to the Palestinian people, that Hamas would accept those terms and not continue with the idea that, no, we don't want two states. We don't want a Jewish-run single state that we have more rights in. We want these Jewish people imposed by this order of partition that we did not choose, this partly white imposition upon us, or just call it Jewish imposition on us. Get this out. These people shouldn't have been here in the first place, and we're going to keep on blowing stuff up. Now, am I missing something? Maybe I am. I'm not a diplomat. Maybe Hamas in the real world would actually say, okay, if it's like this, we'll knock it off. But I'm not sure they will. It seems to me that they have a very particular project. If I'm wrong about that, good. But I just wonder if Sachs or Beinart has made that case. And Hamas is not Yasser Arafat. This is different. I just wonder. And I haven't followed what either one of them has said about this sort of thing for a few months.
How do you explain Mamdani winning, going away in a Jewish town with the position that he has on this issue?
Because
did you see Peter Beinart in your newspaper yesterday? He has an op-ed in which he says public opinion is becoming much more pro-Palestinian.
Yes.
And he attributes Mamdani's success in part to that fact.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I skimmed that yesterday because I was really busy. But yes, I saw it, and that's definitely a point. And, there, as you said, there are an awful lot of Jewish people, for example, in New York, who are very much in favor of, who are pro-Palestinian, as we call it, and are appalled at what Israel is doing. It's not a marginal position at all. So, no, I don't think that Mamdani's pro-Palestinian position today would get in his way because, let's face it, I'm not trying to dismiss it, but pro-Palestinian is the woke thing. And so, if anything, my thought would be that the kind of people who vote often would be ones who would find that about Mamdani a good thing. No, I did not think that would hurt him. I thought of it as something that would help among my people, so to speak. I'm thinking of, affluent Jewish New Yorkers. I know their temperature. I spend the summer with them. So, no, I'm not surprised at all.
Okay. Does Trump need to be afraid of Mamdani?
I've heard this argument. In what sense?
Well, that he's the leading edge of a certain political sensibility, which if seized upon artfully, and Mamdani has the qualities of articulateness and he presents well and so forth. The argument is that Trump talks a game about caring about the little guy, but in fact, he's in the pockets of the bigwigs. So this one big beautiful bill suggests, and a message that can be developed out of a Mamdani type position of making things affordable, taking care of people who are struggling, et cetera, and giving the shaft to the billionaire class might catch on. He's 40 years younger than Bernie Sanders, 50 years younger than Bernie Sanders. And he's got the AOC kind of vibe going. And, it could be a real populist as opposed to Trump's faux populist threat, something like that.
Here's one of my I might lack imagination answers, and something could come along magic. You have to always be ready for the black swan. It seems to me that with both Mamdani and AOC, they were very young and they had to get their sea legs when they were elected, and that takes some time. And that with Mamdani in particular, what would be something Trump would be afraid of is if he came in and became mayor and actually learned on the job, which I'm sure he was capable of doing, and got some stuff done. Actually managed to pull off about half of what he was saying on the trail. And then if that could be seen as a playbook that works, the problem is you've got to get a magic combination of somebody who actually knows what they're doing, who also is media charming, etc. That person, the person in New York who really should have taken it, the person who really could make a change in terms of housing, for example, is Brad Lander. But Brad Lander is what his name sounds like. And, he's this white guy. He's fine. He tried to make some noise, but he's not exciting because he's not, Mamdani. He's not Ocasio-Cortez.
I never heard of him. To be honest with you, I never heard of him.
See, he's somebody with a whole lot of great ideas about how to fix this stupid, festering city. But he's not sexy. He's not interesting. He's not foreign. I shouldn't have said foreign. He's not white, etc. And so, he made no noise so that you've never heard of him because you don't happen to live here. You need a combination of Brad Lander and Zohran Mamdani, and maybe that will come along. That's not impossible, but it just doesn't seem to have happened yet. Then Trump could be scared. I'm trying to think of who that would be.
Trump, isn't he running the table? This idiot that you were so vociferous in denouncing. Isn't he showing himself to be pretty effective in the office and getting his way across the board and really, calling shots?
Glenn,
yes,
what do you think,
John?
What do you think of the big, beautiful bill? This is your bailiwick. What do you think of that?
I think it's Trump's effort to get his agenda established, that he corralled the Republican House and Senate into backing it. And that it's become law. I think it's flawed in many respects. The $3 trillion that it's adding over the decade to the national debt is a part of it. The threat to security of a lot of people on public health insurance, on Medicaid, is certainly a part of it. Frankly, I wanted to see the Trump tax cuts become permanent, and not only because I'm paying way too much taxes. I'm small potatoes, but I think there's an argument for not raising taxes. There's a lot that's in there. The rollback on the subsidies to green energy, the huge increase in the enforcement resources for the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency. And so on, and one could argue about it. But if I had been in Congress and were a member of the Republican Party, I would have voted for the bill because that's my president and this is his agenda. And if I were a member of the Democratic Party, I would have voted against the bill because that's not my president and that's not my agenda. I don't think it's the end of the world. You could have gone over some of the huge Inflation Reduction Act and whatnot stuff that Biden enacted with a similar degree of skepticism. Larry Summers on one of the Sunday shows yesterday, I think it was George Stephanopoulos, said that he thought it was the worst thing in the world and that 100,000 lives are going to be lost because of the legislation. And I thought, geez, Larry, that seemed to me to be a little hyperbolic. Apparently, there's some study that he was citing, but it's based on the Medicaid cuts and people getting kicked off and whatnot. But I'm not pulling my hair out because of the bill. Trump is getting his agenda enacted. The people voted for him, and this is his policy framework. But that wasn't my point. I expected you to not be a Republican, John, and I didn't expect you to endorse the bill. What I'm saying is he's running the table. Did you hear what the head of the European NATO guy said about Trump when Trump was over there a couple of weeks ago?
What did he say?
Maybe it was even less than that. He said, "This is our leader." He said, "Thank you for encouraging us to raise our defense spending to 5%. He said the United States is 25% of the world economy. It's the most powerful nation on earth. And we're glad to have you as an ally. Bravo, Mr. Trump."
But
I'm just saying, I'm saying less than a year into Trump's second term, he's running the table, and I'm asking you to react to that.
Even starting with calling something like that the big, beautiful bill, it's willfully informal. It's quietly dismissive of people who don't find it beautiful. It's putting his very personal stamp, his funk, let's call it scent, upon it in a towel snapping camp counselor kind of way. That's superficial. But then also the bill is so unfeeling, kind of like that sadistic camp counselor. And no, I never had one that was sadistic, but there is one I often think of when I call people towel snapping. And you're in that person's care.
I see you were traumatized by that experience.
A little.
Okay.
You're 8, and there's this person you're supposed to call uncle, as we did back in the 70s at those camps.
Oh,
and
MG.
You're in their power, and your mother's not around, and they don't like you. That sets you up for what the world can be like. And Trump is that counselor, unfortunately. He even looked kind of like him. And then also just the unfeeling quality of it all, kicking people off of Medicaid and giving the rich more money, and that being the transparent aim of it. And in terms of the table, yes, he's getting his way a lot. There is a charisma. There's a culture of fear. I can't say I thought Iran was wrong. But this is the problem with it, Glenn. It's that his reasons for doing things, and maybe this is being too picky, are never the noble ones, or even just the statesman-like ones. He's never Eisenhower. Eisenhower wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree, but everything he did, it was measured. He was a statesman, even G.W. Bush compared to Trump. And I know I sound like a broken record, but for example, with NATO, the reason he's so into that is simply because he thinks that these countries aren't pulling their weight, and it disgusts him. He's that camp counselor again. It's not about geopolitics. It's that it bothers him in a way that you would imagine with a 4th grade boy, or with somebody who's just having a bad day, and it's really all about him. And then the same thing with Iran. Did he really think about it? Did he sit with people and listen and consider and learn the name of more than one city, even in Iran? Did he think? No, he listened to all of them to an extent. I hear he actually sat down and listened, which I find hard to imagine. I'm glad he did that. And then just went and bombed them anyway because boom, boom. Now, probably was the right thing to do, but I'm not sure he did it for the reasons that Obama would have done it. So no, yes, he's having an effect. Like the book about Trump that comes out. I'm beginning to be able to imagine somebody making a very interesting, although nervy argument that this man changed things, and that some good stuff came out of it. But I can't imagine him seeming to be a hero. I can't imagine that he had a plan. Doesn't that bother you that he doesn't have a plan except being powerful himself? Maybe I'm just thinking too much about it.
No, I think you're wrong. I think he could end up winning the Nobel Peace Prize if things break the right way for him. I think this conflict in Ukraine, which is not anywhere near a resolution as yet, but may yet get worked out in a way that redounds to his benefit in terms of reputation. I think the decision to attack the nuclear facilities in Iran was, I've said here, war with Iran is unthinkable. And I still think ground war, Iraq-like war with Iran is not where you want to go.
Not that again, no.
On the other hand, it looks, in my view, so far to have been a pretty deft execution of a military option under pressure from the Israelis, to be sure, who are independent actors in the whole affair, but nevertheless. And moreover, the maneuvering afterwards, which produced something like a ceasefire between Israel and Iran in the missile exchange stuff, where Israel was vulnerable, it would appear to me, to a potential devastating effect. Trump comes off looking like, somebody who knows what he's doing. I was against the tariff stuff. I'm an economist. What can I say? It didn't look like it made any sense to me. I thought the sky was going to fall. I was worried about my own future financial security because I have, my retirement savings in the investments and stuff. And so far, the sky hasn't fallen, and he's backtracked, and deals are being cut, and it probably won't be as bad as the experts forecast it was going to be in the start, and may yet work out better than anybody thought. But I'm looking at Trump, the guy who was in the dock. I'm looking at the guy who was twice impeached. I'm looking at the guy who was shot. I'm looking at the guy who was the object of ridicule and condemnation and dismissal across the board. And like I say, he's the most powerful man in the world, running this country, getting his way. And that impresses me. And I think there's something historic afoot here in American politics that's going on. No, I'm not calling him George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. He's Donald Trump. He does have a lot of the flaws that you have enumerated, but he's also defining the direction of American politics now. In our era, this is the Trump era that we're living in. And I just want to acknowledge that. I want to affirm that. I want to say, yes, I'm aware of what's going on in my country. My head is not in the sand. I'm not blinded by Trump derangement syndrome like my friend John McWhorter.
He is... No, I'm going to say it. He's a bumbler. A stopped clock is right twice a day. He bumbles from one thing to another. The Nobel Peace Prize bias would mean that they would never give it to him, I think. And in a way, I'm not too sad about that, because it's not as if he's really engaged in forging peace. It might happen that some fires happen to flicker out while he happened to be president. But, Israel and Iran don't know what the fuck they're doing, he says. And he's arranging ceasefires before telling the countries themselves. He's a bumbler. And so here's the difference, Glenn. I just saw Hamilton for the second time, and there's a number in the middle of it where George Washington says farewell. Structurally, it's unnecessary. I've never understood why they spend 5 minutes having George Washington say goodbye. He hasn't been important enough to the plot. It's a flaw. But the song is very arousing. And he says this goodbye, and he's singing about what he did and why. And the song is about what he did for his country. It's about not, I did it for me. It's what he did for his country. If there were a musical about Trump, when he sang that song, when he was finished with this term, it would be what he did for himself. And that kind of person, as compelling as they can be to watch at the time, end up not putting their name on an era. Here's a direct comparison. Adam Clayton Powell Jr. I used to be a really big fan of him because if you see film of him, the Congressman, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., if you see what he did, he's a lot of fun to watch. He was very good as a minister. He would preach twice a day on Sunday, and the ladies would swoon, and everybody would talk about what an amazing what an amazing orator he was. And, he's a womanizer to an extent. He parties, but not too much. I thought he was great. And there was the Powell Amendment that he would attach to any big bill in Congress. And he's working against segregation. But the truth was about him, part of the showbiz aspect, was it was all about him. It was all about Adam. It's not that he didn't care about Black people or the United States, but not much. He cared about himself. And as a result, he flamed out. You see him in the late 60s, dressed in black with amulets, wearing necklaces and saying, "Keep the faith, baby," and talking about Black power. And he's too old and he's just too Adam to really mean any of this Stokely stuff, but he had to stay important. And he couldn't work with Martin Luther King because he thought Martin Luther King was this quote unquote little nigger preacher, and he didn't want to share the spotlight. He thought of King as an upstart. That's why Adam Clayton Powell didn't speak at the March on Washington. That's Trump. It's all about him. I worry that you're getting caught up, no offense, but you're getting caught up in the show. Do you really think that bumbler is somebody who, based on these erratic actions, is going to define an era in a constructive way? Do you think so?
I think he could. Not necessarily, but I think it's certainly possible. Man, I've been saying this for a long time. Bumbler. Well, how bumbling could he be given the success that he's enjoying? He has completely swept the table. In his first administration, he changed the face of the Supreme Court. He's now in his second administration enjoying the benefits thereof. He has completely taken over the Republican Party. People complain about the Democrats. They say they're in the doldrums. They say they're geriatric in their leadership. They say they don't have any ideas. They don't know which way to go. They're too beholden to their various interest groups. They're too caught up in wokeness. Who will save the Democrats? They need a Donald Trump. They need somebody with those qualities, and perhaps egotism or egomaniacal self-love is one of those qualities. Certainly showmanship, P.T. Barnum-esque ability to capture the imagination and retain the attention of the American people is a part of it. But they need a Donald Trump. The Republicans got themselves a Donald Trump, and they now control every branch of the U.S. government, and they're defining the foreign and domestic policy of our country for perhaps the rest of my lifetime. That's not nothing. That is historic. And yes, he is at the head of something that's important. And bumbler. So I think the characterological, he's this or he's that, or he's this type, or his motives are whatever, misses the structural. And the structural, which a guy like him has exploited to his benefit, is a thing that's really going to determine what goes into the history books, not what he had for breakfast.
Well, certainly it's going to determine what goes into the history books, but the question is whether that history will be one that future Americans will be able to see something good in. And maybe I'm just being a baby because, for example, I'm in the middle of Sam Tannenhaus's Buckley biography. And here's somebody who, shaped the country. Buckley lays the ground for Reaganism. And you could say, as has been said by many already, Reaganism lays the ground for Trumpism. That's harder. And even there, though, Glenn, and maybe you'd be better on this than me, that kind of conservatism with which we are now so familiar, it's fun reading about Buckley because he was a weird, interesting, compelling character. Reagan, in his way, was too. Although Reagan kind of went from one thing to another. But no, Reagan at least had a particular North Star. And it was this anti-commie thing that he was minted in. But he did have that, and he could talk about that articulately. But what good came out of that? The Reagan era and all that iconography and, how much fun Reagan was to listen to and the National Review and how intelligent it was. Did anything good come out of that? I mean, it certainly did shape the country, the Southern strategy, et cetera.
Winning the Cold War is something that comes to mind.
Okay. All right. How about domestically?
Well, you had the economic upsurge that came from the Reagan tax cuts in the early 80s. It's disputed, but the idea that was a morning in America type period after the malaise of the Carter years is, I think, widely accepted. Deregulation and whatnot, which actually started under Carter. A resurgence of a sense of possibility for the country. Succeeded by George Herbert Walker Bush as vice president. The election landslides of defeating Walter Mondale in 84 and Michael Dukakis in 88. I don't know. I mean, Reagan is Reagan. And I would have thought that Barry Goldwater, as much as William F. Buckley, were the progenitors of the Reagan upsurge.
And the thing is, and no offense to his descendants, who seem to be extremely, extremely sensitive about preserving his legacy, but what good do we have to say about Barry Goldwater at this point? You know, as influential as he was for a spell, what did he leave as a legacy that we're proud of? You know, not liking the Civil Rights Act of 1964, et cetera. Is he a hero? I mean, I know to some people, but in a general sense, does he get taught in schools today, for example? You know, I may be missing something about him. But.
No, yeah, I don't think you're missing anything. I think Goldwater is probably remembered. What was it? Extremism in defense of liberty is no vice.
And then the other part.
And
what is it? Moderation.
Moderation in defense of. I can't remember exactly how it goes, but
that was a great line. Yeah. Which he probably
he took a libertarian. I mean, it's a theoretically defensible position. I'm reading Thomas Sowell's books now, and some of it takes us back to that era. And the government telling a store owner who they can do business with, or somebody, infringes on their property rights in the interest of imposing a social judgment about non-discrimination. And I agree, it doesn't look good in retrospect, given the way that things turned out. But at the time, I could see a principled libertarian making that argument.
And he wasn't a zealot. He was not somebody who hated Black people. He had supported previous civil rights bills. He just thought that one went too far. Yeah, I can put myself in his head and understand that he wasn't a terrible human being.
Now, Kennedy got killed in 1963. Johnson becomes president, and he's pushing through the Great Society era programs. You yourself had reason to call into question the wisdom of some of the Great Society, expansion of the welfare state, and so on. Barry Goldwater was on the other side of that argument. So I should have thought at least you'd be able to see that there is an argument of a conservative stripe against the seemingly boundless expansion of public entailment, public policy. So
yeah, you got me. That yes. I mean, and I've often said, as far as the Great Society and especially welfare legislation, if I had been there, I would have done the same thing. Nobody could have foreseen what ended up happening. But in a way, you could say that Goldwater and Buckley, et cetera, they were foreseeing it and being dismissed as racist zealots, regardless. Now, Buckley had some really smudgy stuff on his hands about race anyway, but not Goldwater necessarily. And yeah, I can see what you mean by that. These are people who could have foreseen what I would not have at the time as a white.
I'm going to tell you a story about William F. Buckley, whom I knew. I appeared on Firing Line a couple of times.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
In my youth. Yeah, actually, one of them was a debate with John Silber, myself, Bill Buckley, and Dinesh D'Souza on one side.
Jesus Christ.
Versus Stanley Fish, Catherine Simpson, Ron Walters, and Leon Botstein on the other side.
You're kidding.
No, you can look us up.
Is this on YouTube?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. It's like a 2-hour mega debate about political correctness.
Yeah. What year?
90, 91, 92.
Oh, I've got to look at that. Wow.
But yeah, I knew Bill Buckley, and there was a dinner group of conservative intellectuals that he and Richard John Newhouse, the Father Newhouse,
Yeah.
an intellectual author of The Naked Public Square, which was a great book published in the early 1980s, if I recall correctly, that would meet at the Cosmos Club in DC and at the Union League Club in New York. They'd meet twice a year, one in each city. And I was a part of that group. And Abby and Steve Thernstrom were a part of that group. And Norman Podhoretz and
that gang. Yeah.
Bill Crystal and, people and others.
The think tank people. Yeah.
Yeah, think tank people and some of the evangelical Christian intellectuals were, there were one or two, I don't remember their names now. But in any case, Abby and Steve published their book, American Black and White. I wrote a critical review of it, and this review came out in the Atlantic just before.
I remember it well.
The meeting of this group, and Abby and Steve decided to boycott the group. So it was like, they were mad at Glenn and, because Bill Buckley was the host of this meeting, and he had chosen a discussion of the book as the subject matter for the dinner to get the conversation started. I was going to try to defend my review. Abby and Steve elected that they wouldn't participate. And Bill made a speech, and I'm saying all just to say, he said, in effect, it's a fucking book. People have different opinions. Let's talk. Let's not boycott people. Let's get around the table and argue it out. And
he liked that.
He didn't take a side. He read my review in the Atlantic and he said, okay. I mean, I'd like to hear what they have to say in response to it. And, where are they? So that was his kind of like, where are they? I'll tell you another story very briefly about Bill Buckley. I'm in my anti-conservative phase, right? This is why I wrote the review of Abby and Steve's book, which is a fine book.
I use it to this day for the data. Yeah.
But I didn't like it because it was too neocon critic of, and it was negative on the civil rights stuff in a way that at that time. And Bill says, look, he says to me, because a patient is lying fatally ill, and I move on to the next case, I'm the physician, doesn't mean I don't care. It's like he's saying to me, what do you want to do about the inner city? We've tried and it hasn't worked. We've tried and it hasn't worked. We've tried and it hasn't worked. What do you want to do? Don't get mad at me because the problem is festering. I didn't create the problem. I'm not closed to sensible reactions to the problem, but what do you want me to do? And I thought that was reprehensible at the time, but I have a lot more sympathy for that position now than I did then.
Maybe partly because many people's answer would be, you did create it. I mean, you, as in your people, did create this inner city, if that's true. And therefore, you're supposed to be working harder at finding solutions, right?
Who are they when you say you?
Well, white people created the inner
city. The structure, the system.
Yeah.
Redlining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so you have more sympathy for that argument now. I mean, you had more sympathy for that argument then than now. You're saying.
Correct.
Interesting. I can imagine Buckley saying that. Did he say it with a smile?
Sort of. He said it with a wry look of resignation.
Mm-hmm.
It was, look, I'm your friend.
Mm-hmm.
But you're, what was your, you said excessive wokeness?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't use woke in those years, but, Glenn, I feel for you. I understand your emotional attachment here, but, your rational, critical faculties are failing you.
So this is the stage you're at. I knew the Thernstроms well after you did. Like, you knew them at a point, they cut you off. I knew them. They were very mad at you. They mentioned you and that review often. It was clear that they were very, very hurt by that. Stephen hurt, Abby mad. They're both gone now, aren't they?
Yeah, they're gone. Stephen
Both.
passed not long ago.
Yeah.
Abby's been dead for a few years.
Yeah, and he went recently, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were the kinds of people where I think your problem with them was that after a while you started to think that they didn't really care, that they didn't really care about Black people, and they weren't just making points, that they didn't care. I never got that feeling from them in particular, but certainly you get that feeling from the people who surrounded them. You know, you're making me think about my early think tank days, which are now 25 years ago. And yes, sometimes those people, not any of them, I'm not getting into any specifics, but you know, after that second glass of wine, some of them would venture something to me, that made, there's a certain scorn involved at, you know, the Black establishment and Black claims for special help, etc. There was some of that. I didn't feel it in them, but yeah, your review, they did not expect that. I'm almost surprised that they were that taken aback, because it is just a book and we have to criticize each other, but not that.
I betrayed them, John. And
what do you mean?
I mean, we were buddies, not just colleagues. Glenn, my son, who was born in 1989 and who's 36 years old, had, when he was teething, a little stuffed animal that he carried around with him and gnawed on everywhere he went. It was a red lobster, and it was called Abby, because Abigail Thernstrom made him the gift of that when he was 8 months old.
Oh.
That was Linda and I's first child together. We were in Cambridge and Boston. We were buddies. We would go over to their house and have dinner parties and sit on their screened-in back porch and drink cocktails and talk into the night. We would have, when we moved to Milton, Massachusetts, Linda and I with our 2 toddlers, and we had a big, a half-acre lot and, a lot of green shrubs and open space. We'd have cookouts and we'd invite the Thernstrom and others. And we'd hang out together. We were comrades in arms because of the scarcity of relatively conservative. And I mean, I wouldn't even call them conservatives. I mean, at that time, they were contrarian to the liberal race mantra, but, they were moderate people. And there weren't so many of us around Harvard, and we had each other's back. I mean, when Steve came under attack for something that he said in a classroom about something, I don't even remember what it was, and he got accused of being a racist or something.
There was something, yeah, right.
He cited some statistic.
Yeah.
It was a fact. He reported a fact and challenged the class, and then they took him up on charges and whatnot, and I wrote in the Boston Globe in his defense. And likewise, when I came under severe public criticism for missteps in my own life, for which I was responsible, Stephen, and years went by, and the Globe allowed me to publish something. I can't even remember what it was about. It might have been about Clarence Thomas, and somebody wrote in and said to the editor, "Oh, that's the guy that beat up that woman. That's me, who was accused of beating up someone. I didn't do it. She later dropped the charges, but never mind." Steve came out in my defense and said, I remember Alger Hiss being welcome in your op-ed column at the Globe after he betrayed his country. The least you could do is give Glenn Loury a chance to say it. Stephen didn't have to do that. They were my friends. They knew the book was going to be controversial and attacked from the left by the Andrew Hackers of the world. I don't know if you remember Andrew Hacker.
I met him a few times, yeah.
And they expected me to at least be neutral. And I used my review in the Atlantic at length. I mean, I think the damn review is like 6,000 words, to take them apart chapter and verse. And it was because I was mad about thinking that they were too interested in showing that liberals were wrong and not interested enough in actually solving the problem. And that I think you could say was very unfair of me, but that's how I felt at that time. And they felt betrayed. And I never spoke to them again. I never spoke to either one of them again after that review appeared. And
I didn't know you had been
close
that
friends.
Yeah, I didn't know you had been that tight with them. Wow. What made you do that?
You have to read my memoir, Late Admissions.
I don't remember that part. Yeah.
Well, I just told you, I told you my cover story anyway.
It's funny because I can see that when I came, on whatever scene I came onto, I was your replacement. They really fostered me for a while. I've been to their house. I had been to their house, and I invited them. They couldn't make my wedding in 2006, but it was at the point where they were on the list. And we kind of went our separate ways for no particular reason, but I think it was because they could see that I liked Obama, that I was not part of the Washington Republican think tank crowd that they became part of. But I think in me, they were trying to have another you. Not that I could have filled the shoes, but I'm beginning to see that they were looking for something like that. That's interesting. But now I know why they were so mad. I didn't know that part.
Abby introduced me to Marty Peretz, and I started writing for the New Republic as a direct consequence of her putting the two of us together.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
She said to Marty, "You must meet this guy. You have to meet him." And he invited me to lunch and later to dinner at his magnificent home off of Brattle Street in Cambridge. And I became a regular contributor at the New Republic, a contributing editor for some years, in part because of her.
I didn't know
putting
that.
me in touch with people. No, I was indebted to her for her fostering my career. So they felt betrayed. I mean, the direct answer to you is I wanted to curry favor with the Negro cognoscenti. I wanted rehabilitation from the Black elites. And I was enacting a certain kind of mea culpa. Oh, yeah, I know I've been conservative. I know I was a Reaganite back in the day, but, I've come to my senses. And I used them as a stepping stone to that public performance. And I can't say I'm proud of that, but that's the truth.
That's hard. Because that was a really good review. I remember it still. I loved your stuff in the New Republic, and I remember that review. And then when I read it, I didn't know anything about the personal relationships of the people involved. I hadn't met anybody yet, but I remember where I was when I read it. It was about 6,000 words, and I thought, this nails that book, which I had read and enjoyed in many ways, but still I agreed with you. But now I can see why they were not expecting to read that. Yeah, that's too bad.
All right, John, we have talked. I think we can subside. We will get together later for a Q&A for the month of July. That'll be available to paying subscribers at glennloury.substack. My thanks, John, for your time and your intelligent commentary.
Whatever works. This was fun as always.
All right, my friend. Take care.
Talk to you soon.